Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Sheila Carter had been fighting for years to live a regular life, or at least one that didn't involve body bags or handcuffs. She was restless after her divorce from Deacon, the kind of restlessness that made Monaco look like the only place with hope. Finn was present. There was Steffi. They had the ideal excuse for a private reunion thanks to the Forrester Company development, and Sheila had concluded that enough time had passed for her to re-enter the picture. Without hesitation, she reserved the seat next to her son on the flight, believing that closeness would gradually soften the harsh boundaries Steffi had set around their family. The subtle allure of another secret that awaited her on the other side of the Atlantic was something she had not anticipated. Her initial days in Monte Carlo turned out just how she had anticipated. On the plane and at the hotel, Finn was already negotiating with her in hushed tones, nervous and vigilant. Steer clear of Steffi. Avoid going near the chapel. Avoid making their anniversary a show for the general public. Sheila listened with the deliberate patience of a lady who knew when to wait and when to nod. She knew that pressing too hard too soon would only push Finn deeper into Steffi's corner, so she consented to keep her distance, at least for the first several days. Instead, she strolled around the harbor, taking in the polished throng and boats while allowing the Mediterranean sunshine to envelop her like a momentary truce. The truce was broken on the third afternoon. She had eaten a late lunch at a tiny terrace cafe with a view of the water. It was the type of establishment where the servers moved with practiced invisibility and everyone's discussions remained private. 2 tables away, a young woman nursing a glass of something pale and pricey wore an oversized pair of sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. If the woman hadn't moved at the perfect time, if the light hadn't captured the familiar set of her mouth and the line of her jaw, Sheila may have completely missed her. The realization was like a delayed explosion. Sheila just gazed for a full second, confident that her eyes were pulling a nasty trick that grief occasionally conjures up. The woman then raised her glass, and there was no mistaking the action. Luna. Live. Inhaling. Sitting in Monaco as though the previous year's turmoil, burials, and hushed cover-ups had never occurred. Sheila's initial reaction was one of complete incredulity that verged on rage. She had watched Lee deliver the news while standing in the hospital hallways. She had witnessed Finn's startled stillness and Poppy's complex relief. She had even given herself permission to grieve in secret for the granddaughter she had just recently gotten to know, the one who carried the same restless gloom that had characterized so much of her own life. The body had been taken by Lee. Lee had taken care of the paperwork. There was enough proof for everyone who needed to believe the story to go to sleep at night. However, Luna was still very much alive and present in the same city where Finn and Steffi were attempting to restore what little tranquility they had left. Sheila stayed away from the table. Before the urge to confront could overcome the cooler need to comprehend, she paid her bill with firm hands and turned to leave. Replaying every memory she could recall from the weeks following the shooting, she spent the remainder of the afternoon walking around the streets with a renewed sense of purpose. Lee's absence. The silent apartment visits. The way Luna had woken up and quickly resumed chatting about Will, as though the gunshots and blood had only been a passing annoyance. At least initially, Sheila had been a member of the group that kept the secret. She had brought gentle words, soup, and the kind of practical advice that only a lady with her unique background could provide. However, the configuration had changed at some point. Luna was no longer in the safe areas. The ankle monitor was no longer a problem. Afterward, the official narrative solidified into a consensus. Until now. By the evening, Sheila had enough information to conclude that Luna's visit to Monaco was not coincidental. The young woman was situating herself, not just concealing. The dark spectacles and the broad hat were hardly tourist attire. They served as instruments. Luna had selected the same city, the same week, and the same crowded luxury that allowed for both temporary and feasible anonymity. Sheila went back to her hotel room and spent a long time staring out the window at the lights along the sea, estimating the harm that would ensue if Finn or Steffi even caught a glimpse. She got in touch the following morning. It wasn't hard. Once she felt safe, Luna had always been careless with the little things. Sheila only stood at the same terrace till the well-known person reappeared, at which point she uninvitedly moved into the vacant chair opposite from her. The sunglasses were removed. Neither woman spoke for a moment. Like a third presence, the Mediterranean air flowed between them. Sheila finally exclaimed, "You can't be here." She didn't say as loudly as she wanted to. Luna gave a tiny, pointed smile. "It's funny. I was going to say the same thing to you." The discussion that ensued did not result in the poignant reunion that Sheila had hoped for. The negotiation was carried out in deliberate, measured terms. Lee's protection had eventually turned into a prison, Luna stated in the bland tone of someone who had practiced the tale. The alternative had become weaker than the secrecy. She had to breathe. She needed to go away from Los Angeles and the people who still wanted her imprisoned. For a while, Monaco provided both. She was wealthy. She had fresh documents that might withstand casual examination. And unless it suited her, she had no intention of returning to the Forrester circle. As she listened, Sheila's chest began to rise with the old familiar battle. Blood was blood. No amount of criminal background could change the fact that Luna was Sheila's granddaughter since she was Finn's daughter. This young woman, who was sophisticated, restless, and still looking for a place to land, had the same darkness that had previously drove Sheila to extremes. However, the timing was disastrous. Finn and Steffi were already balancing on thin ice. Everything would blow apart at the sight of Luna alive and breathing. Sheila responded, "You have to go." Not the following day. Luna cocked her head. "Today. Or what? Will you inform them? After everything we've endured together, you'll turn me over." The issue lingered, weighed down by the past. Sheila had assisted in keeping it a secret. On several occasions, she had opted for family over the more hygienic route. If she made that decision now, she would have to acknowledge that the relationship she had attempted to establish with Luna had ultimately been fleeting. Sheila changed strategy rather than providing a direct response. She mentioned Finn. About the shaky progress he has achieved. About how Steffi's face continued to stiffen at the mention of specific names. She told Luna about the previous time their overlapping obsessions had become violent, about the hospital rooms and the lies that had provided them both with momentary shelter, and about the toe Sheila still carried as a reminder. It didn't appear to land where Sheila needed it to. Luna's demeanor stayed composed, almost amused, as though she had already weighed the risk and decided it was acceptable. Eventually Luna responded, "I'm not here for them. Not just yet." Sheila departed the cafe with more questions than answers and a growing sense that the problem would not be controlled. "I'm here because the world is bigger than Los Angeles, and I got tired of waiting for permission to live in it." Throughout the afternoon, she kept a close eye on Luna as she walked through the city with the leisurely assurance of someone who thought the worst was behind her. When she later went back to her own hotel, she saw Finn waiting in the foyer with a tense expression on his face. He had come to see how she was doing and to make sure the deal they had made on the plane was still in effect. At that moment, Sheila nearly told him. The words came up and paused. The people she professed to want to protect would suffer the most from the fallout once the truth was out, since it could not be taken back. For another day, she held the secret. The city felt different that evening. The shoreline lights appeared more intense. There was a chance of recognition in every passing face. Sheila replayed every choice that had brought her to this very area of the map, walking until her feet hurt. She reflected about the version of herself that had once thought that family and love could be created by pure willpower. She considered the version that had paid the price in blood by standing between Luna and Steffi. Both versions were no longer entirely present. All that was left was a woman attempting to maintain two opposing allegiances without allowing one to destroy the other. The first significant fracture in the arrangement occurred the next morning. Luna has had enough of being invisible. She showed up at a cafe close to the chapel where Finn and Steffi were supposed to meet, so close that a change in the wind or an unfortunate head turn could have put a stop to the act. Before the moment could fully develop, Sheila caught up to her and steered her away with an unyielding hold. The discussion that ensued was less measured and more heated. She was accused by Luna of prioritizing Steffi's comfort over the independence of her own grandchild. Luna was accused by Sheila of treating other people's lives like trinkets. People looked at the argument. Sheila felt the city's walls closing in on her for the first time since coming to Monaco. That afternoon she came to a decision. The secret would need to be handled differently if Luna refused to go on her own volition. With the same icy precision she had previously saved for more long-term fixes, Sheila started outlining the boundaries of the issue. She found out Luna was staying at a tiny hotel. She observed the staff's routines and the calm hours in the lobby. She estimated how long it would take to arrange a discreet departure before Finn or Steffi became suspicious. The plan lacked elegance. It wasn't necessary. It just needed to function long enough for everyone to return to their various parts of Los Angeles and the Monaco trip to come to a close. She discovered Luna once more that night, this time by the sea. Watching the boats, the younger woman appeared nearly at ease, as though the previous year had been a dream from which she had just awakened. Before speaking, Sheila remained silently next to her for a considerable amount of time. She said, "You can't stay. Not in this location. Not while they're present. This ends tonight, but I'll help you disappear properly if that's what you need," Luna said without turning to face her. "And if I say no, I then inform Finn. And Steffi finds out once Finn does. And as soon as Steffi finds out, the machine begins to function once more. You recall how that ends," the threat said. For the first time, Luna's poise broke a little. As though looking for the bluff, she turned and examined Sheila's face. Instead, she discovered the same unwavering will that had gotten Sheila through decades of difficult decisions. "Would you truly harm me like that?" Luna inquired. Sheila replied, "I would do it to protect what's left, including you, whether you believe that or not." As the light dimmed and the harbor lights turned on one by one, they stood there. Luna finally nodded. A slight, hesitant gesture that was more significant than any outward proclamation. Low voices were used to make arrangements. Money was exchanged. Early in the morning, before the city had really awakened, a departure was planned. Sheila led her back to the motel and held off on breathing until the door shut. That night she didn't sleep. She replayed the talk and the expression on Luna's face when the scenario finally became serious as she sat by her room's window and gazed at the black lake. A part of her still hoped that blood would be sufficient, that the two of them could somehow turn the devastation they had both caused into something enduring. A different aspect of her recognized that some relationships were too unstable to endure close proximity. Distance and the silent reassurance that she wouldn't be the one to ruin Luna's meager claim to freedom were the finest things she could do. Luna had left by the time the sun came up. There was nobody in the hotel room. She had taken the dark glasses and the wide-brimmed hat with her. Sheila made one final trip back to the Terrace Café, where she sat in the exact chair where realization had first struck and ordered coffee that she did not drink. Around her, the city went on, unconcerned and lovely, with its boats and its well-groomed crowds, as though nothing had changed under the surface. She ran into Finn beside the chapel later that day. The very fact of Steffi's presence and the quiet time they had managed to secure made him appear lighter, relieving the tension of the previous days. When he talked about the business meetings and how the light hit the sea at different times of the day, Sheila carefully maintained a neutral expression. She made no mention of the quiet departure, the empty hotel room, or the grandchild who had short been in the same city as them. She had discovered that there were some things that were better kept unsaid until quiet itself became to pose a greater threat than the alternative. Sheila barely stayed in Monaco long enough to uphold the initial arrangement with Finn in the days that followed. She avoided getting close to Steffi. She observed the Forrester's schedule of meetings and intimate moments from strategically selected vantage points. With the same careful calm she had brought to the city in the first place, she boarded the aircraft home when it was time to depart. The secret, now heavier but confined, followed her. The regular machinery of life restarted in Los Angeles. In some rooms, Deacon's absence was still audible. Steffi and Finn went back to circling each other cautiously. The Forrester company kept growing. And Luna carried on with whatever form of independence she had selected for herself, far away from the old routines and the well-known streets. Sheila didn't get in touch. She didn't look. She merely carried the knowledge the way she had carried so many other complex realities across the years. Silently, entirely, and alone. She never quite got over her disbelief. The shock of that first realization on the terrace, the absolute certainty that her eyes had lied, followed by the delayed, heavier realization that they had not, would still be present in her unguarded moments months later. Luna had been authentic. The threat had been genuine. Sheila's decision to preserve the precarious harmony surrounding Finn had also been genuine. She refused to answer the issue of whether it had been the right decision. Like certain secrets, some queries were better left unanswered. The Mediterranean stretched out like a sheet of polished sapphire beneath a clear sky as Sheila stood on the hotel's sun-drenched terrace, overlooking Monte Carlo's sparkling harbor. The slight smell of salt, pricey perfume, and the far-off hum of opulent ships loitering at the marina permeated the air. The vistas, the casinos, or the free-flowing champagne in every lobby were not the reasons she had traveled to Monaco. She had come because her son was here, because Steffi followed Finn wherever he went, and Sheila would not be abandoned once more. After catching a glimpse of the flight information on Lee's computer, she followed them halfway around the globe. The former Sheila would have barged in, insisted on being acknowledged, and wreaked havoc. Sheila had made a self-promise to exercise restraint as the new Sheila, or the lady she was working so hard to become. She would remain in the shadows, keep a close eye on things, and demonstrate through her absence that she could honor the boundaries Steffi had carved with blood and fire. However, a restless energy pulsed beneath her skin as she reiterated that commitment to herself. Her greatest vulnerability and most potent weapon had always been her family. The message arrived on the second morning as she was sitting by herself at a café close to the Casino de Monte Carlo, nursing an espresso that she hardly tasted. The phone number was blocked. The words were brutal and straightforward. Grandma. I'm present. Monaco. Keep it a secret. Sheila's fingers gripped the phone so tightly that her knuckles became white. I need you, Luna. She had repeatedly buried the granddaughter in her heart. Sheila's shattered sense of legacy was somehow occupied by the young lady who had killed, deceived, and manipulated. Luna was meant to be gone, perhaps dead, imprisoned, or residing under whatever shaky protection Bill Spencer had previously set up. She wasn't meant to be in Monaco. She was not supposed to be anywhere close to Steffi and Finn. Sheila just stared at the screen for a long time, the lettering blurring as something colder and more familiar battled incredulity. Protecting the lineage at all costs was the first instinct to emerge. Then came the more recent voice, the one that had become more powerful since the endless loop of Steffi's rejection and the divorce from Deacon. Luna's presence here may ruin everything Sheila had been painstakingly rebuilding, that voice cautioned. Steffi would never forgive you if you made a mistake. Finn would never put his trust in anyone. Hayes would never see his grandmother's face as he grew up. She carefully typed her response. Where are you? The response was virtually instantaneous, and it included a pin drop to a peaceful side street close to the old harbor, away from the Forrester contingent and the dazzling hotels. After paying for her coffee, Sheila got up and started to walk. Her heart pounded in a strong, steady rhythm. She would check for herself. Until she met Luna's eyes, she would not accept it. The address led to a modest building nestled between a little chapel whose bells had just completed sounding the hour and a shuttered store. Every step Sheila took echoed in the chilly stairwell as she upped the few steps. A door on the third story was partially open. She opened it with a push. In a barely furnished room, Luna sat on the edge of a narrow bed with her arms encircling her knees. Her face was pale in the Mediterranean light coming through half-closed shutters. Her dark hair was longer, and she appeared slimmer than Sheila remembered. She raised her head and saw the familiar intensity burning in her eyes, the same intensity that had once filled Sheila with both fear and pride. You arrived, Luna remarked. Her voice was soft, almost delicate. Sheila shut the door behind her and leaned against it, observing the young woman who was related to her. I wasn't sure you would, she said. I ought not to have. I know, Luna said, twisting her features into a grin devoid of amusement. However, I am also aware that you were unable to avoid it. Sheila walked across the room and took a seat on the lone wooden chair by the window, saying, We're the same way. The drama taking on in this tiny room was unimportant to the glittering harbor outside. How are you doing here? Everyone believes that I'm dead. Or imprisoned. Or both. Luna gave a shrug. People hold the beliefs they wish to hold. Bill provided some assistance. Then he became weary of the danger. I made my own path. I usually do.